Here we are in the studio, behind the studio at Chief Joe's in Boone, North Carolina. And it's my privilege today to be with Jean Pederson from Canada.
Calgary, Alberta.
Calgary, Alberta. And this is Jean's first time in Boone, first time teaching. And if you didn't sign up for her class this time, you missed it, because it's been a great class. I have never seen as many students produce as much painting as your students are doing. So anyway, I always ask this question. So you've been doing this for a while. When did the light come on and you decided to become an artist?
Yeah, you know, that's a tough one, because when did the light come on? It was always painting and drawing, being artistically driven was always a love that I had, but it wasn't something that was encouraged.
Okay.
So if you're somebody whose folks are concerned about you making a living, that isn't something that often is encouraged, because it is a tough route to make a living as any kind of artist, whether it's a musician or an actor or in the visual arts. And my folks happened to grow up in the 30s, so that was, you know, it was important to get an education, to get a job, not to have fun. And so I got a couple of degrees, and all my options in my degrees were in the fine art faculty. So I was able to get my 200, 300 level drawing, painting, design classes in university without getting a BFA. And so I felt like I beat the system.
Okay.
And I tried to keep my hand in painting through going to figure drawing classes. I love figure drawing. So I would do that through different art groups within the city. I also taught for the Calgary Board of Education.
Okay.
And I was able to, when the art teacher wanted to job share, take half-time art, take on the half of the program, and slowly take over the art program, because I had a major in fine arts from all the options I had taken. And I think through, I don't know what everybody else's experience is like, but I was kind of the kind of person who I had to do art all the time, or I was frustrated.
Okay.
Doing it just a little bit, a half hour here and there, I found very, very frustrating. So when I had my breaks as a teacher at spring break or over the summers, I would immerse myself in painting and drawing, and then I'd always be a little depressed going back. I mean, I love teaching, but it was, you had to pack everything up and put it away, because I couldn't just do it part-time. Over time, I was able to get into some exhibitions, won awards, was asked to write for the Artist magazine over the years, wrote a couple books, and I was able to make this a career that seemed viable, and I was able to give up my tenure as a teacher to paint and do some art education full-time, like teaching at Chief Joe's.
So your transition from being an artist to being a teacher was not a hard one for you?
Oh, it was hard, yeah, because you give up your medical, and you give up your retirement funds and all that. It's a tough thing, because you work really hard to get onto the board and get full-time and get that beautiful position that I did have with the board. So it was tough, but and I weighed this quite a bit. I think that my husband has always been very supportive of doing not only what you love, but what you're good at.
Okay.
And I did have those aptitudes, with abstract and spatial reasoning, all that kind of stuff. And so we had these discussions, and let's try it and see where it goes. And I've had so many fantastic opportunities as a result of taking a risk.
Right. So the title of your class is Seductive Surfaces.
Yes.
And like I said, I probably write your brochure now, that I understand what that title means. So here we have and everybody can see this. I don't know which way it's probably.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. And can you explain seductive surfaces?
Well, absolutely. I think, first of all, I started in watercolor, and I thought the act of putting the pigment on the paper and the way it would interact and move, and whether it was a transparent or an opaque, an organic pigment, was exciting to me. And then I started putting gessos and gouache into the watercolor, and those minglings were exciting. And it was seductive. It made me, it was alluring. It made me want to do more exploration into different mediums on the surface. And so if you look at the definition of seductive, it is words like alluring and making you want to see more and do more of whatever.
So it's drawing you in.
Yeah.
So you're creating an atmosphere that draws people into the painting.
Well, yeah, or it's on your own as a relationship between yourself and the surface. It's really exciting, and as you've seen in the classroom, people, some of them just choose to make a whole bunch of surfaces because it's so much fun.
So let's, we could put that down there. Kind of explain what you're trying to do, what you're trying to say with this.
Certainly. Well, part of the exploration of all the different mediums is layering, and one way of layering is through collage. So with this particular piece, I've done some mingling of wet and wets, whether it's with thick or thin viscosities, whether it's rough or smooth or shiny or matte. And then we start to talk about those same concepts as we're gluing and applying different things to our surface. So you can, well, I don't know if you'll be able to see very clearly, but I've got a number of different types of papers and vellums that I have adhered to this surface on top of a highly decorated ground or substrate at this point. And we will, in the class, learn about how to organize this stuff so that it's not so busy and it can communicate whatever your intentions are.
So yeah, I mean, abstract does communicate kind of a feeling.
Yeah.
So here we have, you can see this. That would look good on my living room.
Right. Well, both of these two next pieces are really, in this class we're exploring referential and non-referential imagery. So both of these pieces are non-referential, organic, abstract pieces. So there's no subject in them, but they're very organic in nature. One of them has a cool. Darker emphasis, and one has a warmer, lighter emphasis. And it's really about blending those colors and shapes together into ways that are appealing for you and the audience, so that you can communicate those elements and principles of design in a way that creates a dialogue with the viewer.
And it seems like you've been able to help your students see the process of putting paint and surfaces on a piece of paper.
I think so. I think they've been having just a blast looking at these different ways of working up a surface. We also talked about shiny and flat.
Oh, wow.
So this particular piece has a gloss medium on top of it. A lot of times when you're working either with watercolor or gessos, your surface becomes very flat, and that's nice if you don't want any reflection issues, but it does hurt your color and your value emphasis. So if you put a gloss over top, it brings out all that nice rich color. And so I was just showing the class how that can kind of energize the color within a piece.
And before we go any further, one of the questions I always ask, and I know that having done this many, many, many times, you have a real responsibility coming into a class, whether the class is 10 or 20 or 25 people, to impart something to them. So in answer to this question, what do you want your students to leave with? What is your, when you come into a class, what is it you want to give them to take home?
Enthusiasm.
Okay.
You know, I mean, of course I want them to learn the concepts. I'm very much a concept teacher. But I think if you're not having fun doing what we're doing,
Right.
then you know it's you're not going to try the concepts.
Yeah.
So I think and also when you're teaching a class of 10 or 20 or however big your class is, people are going to be at different stages in their creative journey. And so you kind of have to try to teach to having everybody have a common knowledge base, and then if some people have a little bit more experience, then you will present some of these ideas so that people can work at different stages and be comfortable in their own skin working
Right.
where they need to work. So of course there's going to be information, techniques that I'm sharing with everybody, but I really want people to leave with some enthusiasm to keep working.
One of my favorite painters, Bob Burridge, always left me with, if you're not having fun, why are you doing it? And,
Yeah.
and you're a very messy teacher. I mean, in terms of...
I'm messy.
And your
Yeah.
students are really just doing everything, it seems like. I mean, not Pollocky throwing stuff on a piece of paper from a 8-foot ladder, but it's been really inspirational to watch your students. Some of them are just kind of, I mean, they're gonna be energized through the rest of the year, maybe the rest of their lives. And, that's been good. So here we have a piece matted.
So all of these pieces start out with layers. I'm all about layering, whether it's with the acrylic paint, whether it's with collage. This piece started out as an abstract collage, then I put a face on it, then I painted over it, and then I came up with another design and scrubbed it off. And here we've got the face emerging again. And I wouldn't have been able to paint it that way had I not had the courage, and that's part of what I was trying to teach the class, was
Right.
to have the courage to not have fear when you paint, because that really holds you back.
So yeah, I mean, I think this is pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, and I like to talk about the surface quality. Of course, this course is called Seductive Surfaces, and so what is the surface quality like? Is it rough or smooth? This particular piece has quite a big chunk of acrylic that I've collaged onto the surface, so there's actually quite a bit of relief. So if the light's going to shine at different times of the day, it'll provide shadow. So this particular piece is going to change and shift depending on what the lighting is like, and I find that really fascinating.
Yeah. So if you go to jeanpederson.com, I think, you can probably find more of these. The flower,
Well, you know, we have in my home, I've got this nice round table in my living room and a whole bunch of windows that face to the west. And in the afternoon, the sun comes in and it's just magnificent. And so I often will put these flowers on my table and sketch out the flowers that are backlit. It's just really fun. And they're forgiving, you know. No flower cares if you give it an extra petal or you take a few away.
Right,
Whereas if we're doing a portrait, it's kind of important that you know
Right,
you've got a couple of eyes, a nose, and a mouth in somewhat the right spot, unless we're
nobody
perhaps-
knows what that really looked like.
Right,
But
right.
that wasn't the point.
Right. The point is giving the feeling
Right.
of the sunlight and the flowers sitting in an environment. So.
And see, people that are watching this don't see the surface the same way when you look at Van Gogh's stuff in a book and then you see it in a museum, you see the layering and the brushwork and the passion that he put into it, which is kind of, you've taken that and they're probably just seeing kind of a flat painting. They're not seeing the detail and the roughness and what you've done behind the scenes, in a sense. A little piece of yellow there. I like it.
Well, I always think that you, from a distance, should be able to see an interesting design that draws the viewer in, and then when the viewer comes in, they'll see all these really cool little areas that are, you know, shifting and changing because of value or color or texture, whatever, to make those little areas little jewels that they want to keep looking at.
Right.
So this was a little floral demonstration that I did in class, and I just wanted to show people how you can change your mind anytime. I started out with the flowers being on the blue shades, and I said, what happens if we shift it up and make it warm instead of cool? Also, I've got some striations in the back, and they were very heavy with the light and dark, and we talked about why that drew your eye and why it was important to calm it down so that we could pull the painting together and the intentions then would be communicated more clearly.
Right. So last but not least, we've got, it looks like that kind of goes that way.
You got it. So I brought with me some flowers for the class to look at and to draw from life if they chose to. And what I did was I showed them how you could alter and change what was so that you give the impression. Certainly it's nice to draw high realism. I love drawing portraits in a more realistic manner. But I think it's very fun and interesting if we can subtract and take out as much detail as possible and still have it feel like the essence of what I started with is there. So this was a bunch of flowers that I had laying on a table with a shadow, and it just sort of evolved into this vertical and horizontal composition. I had so much fun with the values and the hot colors, some line work using a colored pencil, and I also have some collage in a few different places to give it that really interesting surface quality and texture.
So in closing, let's say we have people that are kind of searching. So do you have any kind of words of wisdom, you know, keep on keeping on, or, you know, that kind of so somebody's out there struggling a little bit, what would you tell them?
Well, I think if you're, first of all, if you're in a slump, what gets you out of an artistic slump is doing. By doing, you'll get your groove back. I don't know how else to say it. But I always tell my class three things. I think you need to understand the limitations and strengths of your products, understand them. You have to understand your subject, and really be confident with it. And then you have to know yourself. Who are you, and what is it that you want to say to the viewer? And that's how you're going to be authentic and do your best paintings for the world.
Well, I guess Jean will probably, we alternate every other year, I guess, so look up JeanPederson.com and see what she's up to. And Jean, I thank you for taking time out of your busy week at Cheap Joe's to talk to me and the rest of the world, right?
Well, thanks for having me. It was really fun. Thank you.